Jim Zecca and Tim Trent. I asked you guys during the break, and you all wanted to answer, and that is, how do you come off with this and not sound like a bigot? How are you able to do this and say they're not welcome and not feel like someone's looking at you as if you're a bigot?
Bill, I think what we've been trying to say is the facts here all morning long. What's happening in our district?
But those facts aren't. But
those facts are correct.
They're really not. When you look at the numbers here, let me give you numbers that are real numbers.
And then he argues with you.
Okay, listen, you're going to have to live with the fact that this is the way it works. Okay, I'm going to interrupt for a second, and then you can continue. So, based on from 2010 to 2015, Utica is 10th out of 13 cities in upstate New York. In New York State, not just upstate New York, and when it comes to the population of immigrants that have come into the city. 10th out of 13. It's not like Utica is the dumping ground, if you will, is what you're saying, for immigrants and refugees throughout New York State. That is not true. Okay,
too much for the city of Utica to handle right now, and it's been a proven fact in the school district. This is another problem. The Department of State decides where refugees are settled. Then why aren't they rotating these refugee centers? That, by the way, the feds pay nonprofits such as, and I believe this one is Catholic Charities USA, to rent and furnish apartments for refugees, enroll them in English classes, and put their children in public schools. In New York, upstate cities like Buffalo, again, a tremendous burden on the city of Buffalo, Syracuse, $900 a month for housing stipends are given to these people. Where are you going with $900 a month?
I want to bring Trin
but going back to Chris Salatino, he said that, and again, the schools have been very supportive of diversity. That's not the problem. The problem is, as explains Christopher Salatino, and this was in the West Virginia Gazette, Chris head of the Utica School Board of Education, but it's coming with a pretty large price tag. Depositing refugee children in a school district without bringing money in is an unfunded mandate.
That is absolutely that is true. That's what we talked about earlier. If they're not going to fund it,
then it needs to be spread out across the state, across the country. Why not move the refugee centers? Why does a refugee center have to stay in Utica for 30 or 40 years? Why can't it move from city to city? So
do you not see though how refugees in this city have really built the city of Utica?
Absolutely, the Bosnian population have been tremendous, but they came in.
So which ones should we not let in? The blacks, African countries? Which refugees shouldn't come in?
But the bottom is
we'll let the Bosnians in, but who doesn't come in?
It's the numbers. It is the numbers. The bottom line is the numbers.
Chris Salatino went on to say Utica has laid off large numbers of teachers and cut art, music, and other extras.
That is correct. That is correct.
Translators and special instructors for refugees.
But it's based on the fact that there's a lack of funding.
But realistically,
has been waiting.
But realistically, how many languages are spoken? Astrid, how many languages are spoken in
it's over 40 languages. We know that, right?
40 languages in a city of our size. We're in New York City.
Trong is back here. She's been waiting. Can you let her talk?
Sure.
Okay. Trin, you've been listening and pipe in.
Right. So you guys argue that like refugee students for the Utica City School District. Not true. And also do you guys know anything about how school education funding works? Because I do, and for every refugee student that comes in, New York State pays an extra allocation for them to make up for the economic cost that is incurred. So the problem that you guys have isn't with the fact that refugees are like bleeding the school district dry. The problem you guys have is with the way that the New York State legislature and the way that the governor funds New York State education. I can tell you as a fact, before 1980, when refugee resettlement really took off, our school was already being underfunded. And how do I know this? I just wrote a research paper on it for one of my classes here at Yale. So,
well, it's it's
not causation.
And it's
the same for the West Utica poverty thing. Just because the refugees live in Utica and there's poverty in Utica doesn't mean that the refugees caused the poverty. So I'm waiting for you guys to find a statistic or some kind of solid piece of evidence from an accredited news source that can directly link the two.
So if I can just say one thing here, and I do think this happens, and Bill, this gets back to your question. How do you make this argument or present your concerns without seeming like a racist or bigot?
It doesn't work, by the way. You guys all seem like racist and bigots.
But I don't think that Jim and Tim and the whole group is saying. Well,
This
I don't know
is
what
the
to say. I don't
same.
think they're saying
You're talking to a
refugees are bad.
councilman. You know I work with you when you were a student, and the students in the inner city.
But this is-
you're
this-
calling me a bigot and a racist. That's pretty ridiculous.
She said
when
you
you
s-
know what I've done in West Utica.
She said you sound like one.
Well, we
You know
may
what?
sound-
And I think, Jim, I think you have a legitimate gripe. I think if you bring these things up, you do appear that way. And I don't think you're saying refugees
Which
are
was
bad.
which was my question.
And
You know, and it's not a-
Trent's point,
it's
excuse
not a-
me, Trent's point is that the funding isn't there. And I don't think these guys are saying the refugees are bleeding us. I think the
No.
state needs to step up and do
That's
this.
true. And remember that what Trent is saying is the funding is not there. The funding is there for refugees. The funding is not there. Proper funding is not there for our schools right now. So whether there were refugees or not, Utica City School District was laying people off. And
But there's
they,
other things besides just schools and funding. There's other
Right.
things, and when the money, everybody knows the basic economic principle. You can't. That your resources will run out.
Yeah.
You can't spread them out across everybody.
when did you come to this country? You were born
I
here.
was born
and
here.
your ancestors, where were your parents born?
I'm American. I don't
Okay.
care. I don't care about my ancestry.
no, where
I'm
were-
American. I
At
don't
some
need
point, though-
Heritage.com or Ancestry.com to tell me who I am. I
Yeah.
watch the commercial, and the woman gets on there and says, "Now I know who I am."
No, you
Lady,
know
if you're
who you
50,
are.
60 years
Yeah.
old and you don't know who you are, and
But
you're
what-
not an American,
Yeah.
what's wrong with you?
What's Trent, though?
I assume
That's-
she's an American if
that's up
she's
to her.
naturalized.
That's up to her.
to
I'm a
declare who
citizen.
she is.
She-
I'm an American, period, not
Yeah.
an American hyphen.
But I guess you know where I'm going, though, is that this city, Irish, Italian,
Diversity
hold
from the
on.
beginning. The
Yeah.
diversity
Can
is
I-
the word right now.
Can I just finish my point and then you guys talk? That's how we're going to try to do this.
Okay.
Basic conversation. Okay. So when the Italians came, when the Irish came and the Polish came, this same argument was going on. You realize the same people. You,
Wait a
ma'am.
minute, Bill.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
There was someone like you who was far older than you and you probably never met that was making the same argument back then about the Italians, the Polish, and the Irish. We don't need them
There
here.
was
Right.
Ellis Island. There were
There were
We don't need
Right.
these people here. The same argument we're having today. Don't you find
No,
it
we're not
interesting?
having the same argument today.
We're not.
The Democrats, and I hate to say it because I was a Democrat, have really pushed the immigration issue to a height where it shouldn't be at. We're at 1 million refugees a year coming into this country. Do you know what the
No, we're
average was
not.
from when this country started? It was 250 to 255,000, a little bit higher here, a little
Yeah.
bit lower there.
Trent,
but
do
on
you-
average, 250,000 immigrants per year. There was quotas. You're right, Peggy. And now it's out
Okay.
of hand. It's
Trent-
not only 1 million immigrants coming in legally,
really-
that's
let's-
illegally.
let's try to
Then
keep
you've
this-
got- well, these are facts, though, Bill. You got to
Jim,
hear them.
Let's try to keep
A
it focused on
million-
Utica. That's really what we've been
But
talking
well,
about.
here-
Again, these all.
Okay.
Well, no, it ties into Utica because the Department of State decides where the refugees are settled,
Okay.
and that's dead wrong.
Trent-
And Trump is going to change that. It's going to leave the communities to make that decision,
All right,
not
Trent?
the government, the federal government.
Go
That's
ahead.
the problem.
Trent, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's clarify and let's get one thing straight. So I think what's most important to think about in terms of Utica is that it's a refugee resettlement, not just general immigration. So it's kind of like a non sequitur to bring in to lump them both together. So 1 million refugees didn't come in last year. That's just wrong. And also another argument that I would
Then
like
what's
to raise
the number,
is
Trent? Tell me the number.
last fiscal year was about
How many
100,000.
illegal immigrants and how many legal immigrants are coming in?
We're not talking
what
about
numbers
legal-
you're
we're
hearing.
not-
The numbers do vary.
We're not talking about illegal immigrants. We're talking about refugees. And in the
I'm
26th
talking about the
fiscal year-
Mohawk Valley Refugee Center, Resource Center for Refugees. That's what I'm talking
Just
about.
let her finish.
So am I. So am I. And it's called the Resource Center for Refugees, not undocumented
Called the
individuals.
Mohawk Valley.
Right.
Okay.
It's called refugee resettlement. So stop talking about illegal immigrants. Stop talking about. We're talking about refugees, which is a very small subset of the immigration that enters the United States, heavily vetted. Anyway, I would like to bring up a different argument because you guys are all individuals that are involved in politics and care about politics. Well, can't you argue? Well, immigration has done a great thing for our area insofar as it's increased our population numbers and has increased our representation in Congress. So,
That is true.
1980s, like the industry left Utica, and if it wasn't for refugees, our economy would not be as strong as it was, and our population wouldn't be as high as it was.
Well, and you might be losing the former Assemblywoman's seat, the Congresswoman's seat, if it wasn't for the immigration.
But there you
to be
go,
honest.
Bill. It's going back to politics. And you know what? Another thing, and
Okay.
I was on the council. I know what was talked about previously in the previous administrations. They were worried about losing CDBG funding because the city was going to drop below a certain level. We wouldn't get the $4 million that is guaranteed. Utica gets guaranteed pretty much $3 to $4 million a year in CDBG funds because our population is above 50,000. If we drop,
But you wouldn't
below
want it to drop. That would be a
50,000,
bad thing
we
if it
would,
dropped.
Yeah, it would be a bad thing. But again, we're depending on government. Always depending on
right.
government. Why don't we take care of our own problems instead of always worrying about somebody else paying the bill? That's been the problem.
And why weren't businesses brought here so that we could attract people from other states? We seem to be populating by immigration now rather than by birth and by people coming from other states to find jobs to locate. It's a beautiful state. It's one of the best. I mean, it's the only state I've ever lived in.
Yeah.
Used to love New York, and now. Why didn't we attract people from other states? I live over in North Utica, and the whole texture of my neighborhood has changed.
What does that mean, man?
I could tell you the
No.
state of New York is
Jim,
overburdening
Jim,
businesses.
Jim,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
It means that certain things have been going on that we had no trouble with at all.
So
Until and I'm talking about a temple that was built in North Utica that we had to go to City Hall 6 times, and they got the refugee center there. They were denied a statue that was beyond what codes would allow, and we had to go 6 times, and they were denied all 6 times. And the first thing they said to me is to the group was how we appeal. And then they brought in Father Salerno. They brought in the refugee center director. They brought in Lakewood, their lawyer. And all of a sudden, you can do whatever you want. So now they have it, and they said they could only pray outside. They could only pray outside. I live next door, and there's probably 10 cars. They meet twice a year, at the most. And this is not the America. And we've always had diversity. Always had it.
Lord, ma'am, the more you talk, the more you scare the hell out of me.
Yeah.
But I appreciate
and you do
it.
of me.
I'm sure I do. But changing the fabric so people of other color, people of other beliefs or
We've
other
always had
cultures
that.
have moved into your neighborhood, and that's
We've always had that.
yeah.
I don't think
That's what she said. I didn't know what was being said.
she didn't say
know-
people of
Bill,
color.
where do
though.
you
She didn't
live?
say people of color.
And have you been affected by
This
any
isn't
of-
what we're doing, Jim. It's not. This isn't you
Well,
interviewing
but
me.
it's true. I
Yeah.
mean, if you don't live in the neighborhoods that these people are living in,
I
lived in
understand,
the inner city of West Utica. I know the problems that were there, and I know the poor people that had to deal with these problems. But
At the end of
It
the day,
happens.
though,
It's reality,
at the end of the
Bill.
day, what I see and based on, I guess, in my tiny little world, I see people that come here that are whether immigrants or refugees that have come to this area. Their parents completely take school and education to a different level. They're constantly, the kids don't watch TV, they study. They go to school, they become doctors, they become lawyers. These are the people that I see as refugees that are coming in. You're kind of giving a brushstroke of the refugees that can't speak English, the ones who then go to crime and live in impoverished neighborhoods. I'm not sure that's fair. Don't you see?
Both. There are
There's
both
There's
classes of
But-
refugees.
But that's all we're saying.
do you
Bill.
know the
We're at
percentage of
I
which
know,
is-
but
is
we're at
which?
a tipping point.
Yeah.
We're at a tipping point. You can't say we're
We
not.
are at a tipping point here.
It's
Don't
too
you think
much.
we are here at a tipping point
What
where
the people see, and they don't
Yeah.
have to read the numbers. They just need to go out of their homes and see what's happening, and see how they're treated, and see how they're
Okay.
called bigots by
Yeah.
other people. Some people call us bigots when we're not.
sometimes I don't believe you're a bigot, but I think you talk like one. That's all I'm saying. You do. What you said here today is
It's not
is
bigoted. It's not bigoted.
I'm afraid it
because I
is.
have an
It's fear.
opinion. Because
It's-
I have an opinion different than yours
Well, and
makes me a bigot
an
or a racist.
opinion
As you
can
brought
be
in.
bigoted, right? An opinion. It's your fear of other cultures. It's
not a
it's
fear.
I've lived here 70 years, and we've had multiple cultures
Right.
in this city,
Right.
and diversity. And I was brought up in East Utica, and I saw every type of culture and event. And
I'm sure you did.
We certainly went to all the German festivals and the Italian festivals and the Irish festivals. The festival we need to go to is the American festival.
Okay.
Yes.
And I'm not, please, I'm not saying you're a bigot. I'm saying when you talk sometimes it comes off that way. And that's
And we
why.
have to stop talking, don't we?
Well,
That's what you're saying. It's
can't
pretty much
stop
shut
No,
it down.
I'm not
That's,
saying that.
That's
I mean,
the bottom line.
just-
That's where your message is going.
No, my message is, ma'am, after 7 years of life, I would have thought that at this point you'd choose your words more carefully. That's all.
My words are my words.
I understand that.
Bill, that's
I-
the problem.
wrap it. Let's-
I want
Why
to
do
go.
I have to choose my words carefully? Why?
Because people judge
This
you
is
by
America.
the words you right. You can say whatever you want. No one's saying you can't.
Then
But
where do you get the right to tell me I have to say?
No, I'm only saying if you don't want people to look at you as a bigot, choose your words differently.
I say, look at me as a bigot. Because if
Okay.
I my having my say in this country and in my life,
No one's
it
saying you
makes me
can't
a
have your
bigot.
say. You just have
But-
to. You have to be responsible and
But
live
it
with the
labels
words.
me a bigot. So
Consequences, the
that's what I'm
things that we
saying to
do,
your
you have
audience. They have
consequences.
to come out of the shadows because there are people out there who feel the way we do, and they're afraid to come out because of things like this.
Yeah. All right.
I want to go back to where
I'm
I
wrapping
started.
this up now.
Yeah, I'm
can we
going right
can we
back
wrap
to
it
where
up?
I started.
Trent, do you want to close from and I'll let you go? Do you want to leave any parting words here?
I'm just going to leave with a very basic thing, and it's that like refugees contribute to the United States, and no one has the right to say that no one should be against immigration unless you were Native American and born here. Because I'm sure these people, like if you trace your ancestry, and I don't care what, like apparently you make the argument that like being American means having a certain subset of values. Well, guess what? I met some refugees that are more patriotic and more American than some like natural-born Americans themselves. But anyway, my point is, unless you're Native American, you shouldn't be making an argument about, like, essentially, like, your Eastern European heritage qualifying you as American. I mean, refugees are an asset to our community. We work, we pay taxes, we go to school, we become doctors and lawyers. If you don't like it, I don't know, go to a different country.
All right, Trent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Not bigoted.
As an American, I'm going to go to another
please.
country.
Well,
Come on.
an American just told you to go to another. Let's forget that, okay?
Yeah.
And by the way, she might be operating on you someday, so be
Yeah.
careful.
I-
If she chose to be a doctor.
I'd like to just
wrap it up. We got to
I'm
wrap
going
it
to
up.
wrap it up
Wrap it
right
up.
now.
I've had enough.
The resettlement practices of the Mohawk Valley Resource Center for Refugees 2 years ago resulted in 1,600 refugee English language learners in the Utica City School District compared to 25 in New Hartford, 65 in Rome, and 17 in Clinton, compared to those 1,600 in Utica. And the Utica School Board president said, I'll return to that quote,
I don't wanna-
Utica has laid
Yes,
off
I know.
large numbers
Yes.
of
We've already
teachers.
done this, though, Tim.
And Utica has laid off large numbers of teachers and cut art, music, and other programs to pay for translators and special instructors for refugees.
Because the state failed to fund it. So the funding has to be... Okay,
Well,
right.
wait a minute. Where's the federal
Let me-
government? The federal
Matt
government's
has
forcing
been waiting
the
on the
numbers
phone line
us.
for
They
about
should be
30
paying.
minutes. Matt, quickly pipe in, and I got to take a break.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that you had Chen on, and it just shows the quality of this show because you've conducted this interview completely biased. I believe you shot Peggy down, and I think that I didn't hear you once tell Chen to stop her message or her diatribe, and she has been acting like an elitist. She's been calling your opposition names. I just don't think that that's the correct way to hold an unbiased interview where people can have their spoken things get across.
Got it. Okay, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate that. Marty in Vienna, you're on.
Yeah, hi. I think that most of us would agree that someone like Trent has been great, and I think that some of the immigrants have been some of the best Americans. What I understand these guys are saying there is there's got to be more vetting. The vetting has been poor up to this point. When somebody comes into this country, they should be vetted at what they're going to contribute to this country, and I think everybody would agree on that. The vetting has been poorly, where they're going to live, what they're going to contribute. These should be decided ahead of time.
Well, I think that that's more of the national issue on all of this, and there is a current debate about that, right? And Trump's going to fix all of that. So, all right, guys, enough is enough. Thank you. I got a break.